Hi, and welcome back to another Well Workplaces podcast. I'm here with Natalie Flatt. How are you,
Hi,
Nat?
Tom. I'm okay. I'm all right. As I've just finished my cheese toastie, no, I haven't. I like that
you,
one.
yeah, you kind of inspired the copy for this one, which is obviously we're talking today all about food and mood connection, and yeah, really interesting topic. Given that I don't know about you, but I found that like maybe last year during winter and probably a couple of COVID seasons under the belt, I personally put on around, I reckon, 5 to 10 kilos easily. And it was, for me, it was a lot of probably just emotional eating, I think, when I think back to it. And also,
Yeah.
um, really probably just in the not the best headspace for getting out and moving at as regularly as I am now, for example. So it's quite interesting how when you're in that, I guess, that cycle of fight or flight or stress, it does link in, make you feel, it makes you eat pretty poorly. Let's be honest. So,
Yeah.
and obviously then that has a flow-on effect to our moods as well. So anyway, so I thought I'd to get you back on and connect again, just to talk about the food aspect and how that can link in with our mental well-being. Maybe we kick off with like, what are your thoughts anyway on eating and mood? Have you had the last couple of years? Have you had the same issues as me, or is it just me?
I think we all have, Tom, that we had
Yep.
that element of stress and that, that leading to the burnout and stress is it enhances our cortisol levels in our body. And sugar is actually then provides what we can class a chill pill, because it then starts to increase our levels of serotonin. And so the funny thing is that when we are feeling quite high, when we're feeling stressed and we have that cortisol surge, the sugar actually suppresses that response. And it does that in the brain. So it provides a little bit of a trick. So that's why we can feel like when we do crave that element of sugar and we actually feel better for it, it's actually training our body, but it's doing it in a bit of a tricky way, because the more we end up doing it, we can create this level of cycle that, funnily enough, as it goes, it can then turn into depression. Because then we're eating too much sugar. And that's really the only behavior that we then know. So we can fall into the trap really easily. Many of us did. We're living with a lot of stress. We're living with a lot of monotony, a lot of boredom, lack of movement, lack of social connectivity, that level of isolation. So we did develop poorer habits than we normally would, in a normal world. So don't
Yeah.
feel too bad. I think you're pretty much part of the normal
Yeah.
population.
Well, and on the flip side, there was plenty of people that I'd seen where they'd come into our, I hadn't seen them for a while, and they'd come into one of our centres and they'd lost heaps of weight, and they've saw it as an opportunity to get more exercise done and to eat better. So I guess it wasn't all bad, but I think just from chatting with my friends and stuff, everyone put on a few COVID kilos, and you kind of now we're talking about food and mood. It kind of makes sense given that the amount of stress we probably have gone through, and chronic stress through the last couple of years. With emotional eating, I've thrown out that term as if I really know what it means. What does it mean with more of a clinical psych hat on? Is there anything that you
Yeah.
think about that?
And it is like emotional eating is probably more connected to negative emotions, or unhelpful emotions, dare I say. And those unhelpful emotions, more often than not, they can make us feel empty, or make us feel that we have an emotional void. Food is actually believed to be a way to fill that void, and create that false feeling of fullness, or temporary wholeness. So that's why people then feed their emotions there, or that they have that level of emotion eating. So that's that loose connection. Or high level connection there. But the other factors is that we can, when we feel that emotion is becoming overwhelming, a lot of people can retreat. And so that's an anxiety response. Okay. So we can have that fight or flight response. And if we retreat from that social support, we're not talking about our problems. We're not talking about our emotions. So that's when that, and we've heard about closet eating. That's when that closet eating can start to show its head and then become, a bit more of a problematic or a challenge, as that time goes on, if that's the behavior that you feel or that individual feels that it's being reinforced, and they're getting some reprieve from that. Then you also have other activities that may have been taken away, or you may never have thought about, that can otherwise alleviate stress, whether that's exercise, whether that's meditation, whether that is, again, just connecting with, socially, whether that's painting, reading, music, dancing, that could just be one of those default mechanisms. And it's a funny thing, as I was thinking about this, and maybe it was a generation that you were also brought up in, Tom, but when my parents would, like, if I fell over at school, if I was sad, my mum would go, here you go, have a lolly, or here you go, have a chocolate bar. So they were actually
Yeah.
fueling that's when I feel like that, then I should have something sweet. So we were trained to think like that. And that comes a lot up in child dietetics and child psychology now. And I'm very mindful of that with my children, that, if you feel really sad, look, here, we'll give it a bit of a rubber. You know what we're going to do? We're going to go and have a glass of water, and that can cool our body down. So we're trying to change that mindset there. But yeah, we got taught that. And so that is a generational thing as well. But also then not knowing the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. And, physical hunger that develops slowly over time, and we have that desire to try, certain food groups, and we have that sensation of feeling full, and we don't have that negative feeling about eating. But emotional hunger, it can come really suddenly and really abruptly. So you can even say, might have come out of a meeting that just caused you that stress, and you can go straight to the cookie jar. Okay, so you can see that's that connection. It's like, this is going to be my reaction rather than I'm actually hungry. You more often crave the sugary or the high carb foods. You can binge, so you're more likely just to not get that sensation of feeling full. And then you can have that guilt and that shame. So there's that cycle starting to develop there.
Oh, that's really the emotional hunger. That's a really interesting point. I haven't never heard of it explained like that, and that just makes so much sense. I'd imagine as well for people maybe at nighttime, like after dinner, you get to that really like almost before bed, and then people pull out, maybe they're binging on Netflix or something, and they start pulling out a packet of whatever and start eating. Maybe that's the same thing, right?
That's actually called zombie eating. Yeah. So the zombie
Right.
eating, or unconscious eating. Yeah, it's we saw a lot of it. And what we're doing a lot, we were flicking through everyone, the memes are going around saying, I've watched the whole of Netflix, now what do I do, kind of thing, or the continual scrolling. It's something that we can easily be sucked into. We're having lunch and the scrolling through whatever we want to be looking at, and we're eating a lot more than we would usually eat, rather than we can put our phone away and actually enjoy what's in front of us. We're a lot more conscious about it. But that unconscious eating is again a very big, probably that emotional eating, not so much boredness, but just this automatic zombie eating. Not even thinking about what we're putting in our mouth, and that was a big one as well with TV, and we see it a lot in the movies. People
Yeah.
the popcorn's this big. Now, if you're actually sitting there with a friend talking, would you really eat that much popcorn? Or would
Like a
you just,
liter of
because you're
popcorn.
watching
Yeah.
it in the movie? And that's fine. It's a treat. It's now and again. You do it, you're not doing that every single day, because you're not going to the actual movies every single day. But when you're maybe watching Netflix every single day and you're using that as a behavior, that's when you might find you're getting into that unconscious eating pattern, and that can cause, a lot of physical and also mental consequences.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that makes sense as well. The zombie, the zombie eating. That's kind of makes me think of America, where everything's supersized, and they're always sort of eating maybe in a diner, but they're also scrolling their phones at the same time and that kind of thing. So it's really that not really thinking about what you're doing. And I guess that when we talk around strategies for combating that, I'm assuming it's all around being a bit more conscious of what you're actually feeling and doing. Again, is that right?
Yeah, and look, it's when when we, I suppose, approach the whole diet area, we want to not just be focusing just on that physical component. There's a lot of research out there about how it's actually linked to mental health now. And my little passion when I used to my past life of being that child psychologist, my passion was anxiety disorders. And as I started seeing the pattern of children about 20 years ago, I started asking the question to parents, like, how is their food intake and what's their sleep like? And I just started making these anecdotal connections, dare I say, whereas it more often than not, these children with the anxiety, that their diet was quite plain. Their diet was high processed, high carb, white diet. And what we were just seeing is that was an area where I felt like it was really interesting to say, well, they've got this diet going on, then they've got this anxiety. So is there a link there? And as I dug deeper, we're coming into that world of talking about that gut-brain axis, where our gut is our second brain. It's got as many neurotransmitters as the brain, and it talks. They talk, from a physical and a chemical area there. And research is showing that that the higher the processed diet, the more inflamed our body becomes. And when our body becomes inflamed, it actually, in our guts, it actually sends a signal to our brain that can essentially mimic or become anxiety, depression, even Parkinson's disease. There's connections in autism. I'm not political, by the way, to anyone, but this is what research is actually showing, is that when we have a highly inflamed diet, it doesn't just affect us physically, it can also affect us from a mental health perspective there.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think of school at the moment, because a lot of kids are going to school this week, and it's kind of that challenge of the lunchbox again. It's kind of going, all right, well, how do we make this a well-rounded looking lunchbox that's colourful and full of nutrients? And the other part of all of that as well, when you're talking about the plain diet, because a lot of kids are fussy as well. But the other part of that's a flow-on effect is probably just simply the amount of sleep they're getting and the quality of sleep as well, which is important throughout your whole lifespan. But for the kids that are developing and growing and that kind of thing, that's probably another major pillar of their well-being that's extremely important.
Absolutely, Tom. And look, it's a funny thing, because it's all about change. And as you and I talk about behavior change and starting small, we never want to go, we're back in February now. More often than not, the people that have gone and signed up for those diets, the 8-week challenges, or the new gym memberships, they're probably starting to dwindle now. More often than not, they usually dwindle between 4 to 8 weeks. So we're probably going in the dwindling phase now. It's too much too soon, too big. Don't do it. Start small, micro steps. Those small little changes are going to create that success. Now, that can not only be in your diet, but also if you do have children, you are concerned about that in their diet as well. There is a lot of research around about psychobiotics, and psychobiotics are essentially probiotics for the guts that then reduces the inflammation, that gives a better signal to the brain to reduce, again, that anxiety and that depression. So we're not going to focus so much on say antidepressants, but more antidepressants for the gut, dare I say. It's a lot of research that is happening actually in the adolescent phase, where they believe that the gut microbiome needs to be really fine-tuned. And if you can get it right in that adolescent stage, then you are actually able to, it's showing from a longitudinal perspective that they've got better mental health outcomes. So I know that people love the cheese and Vegemite sandwiches are just the only thing that some little kids eat. Don't worry too much about that. But like even in adolescence, where they do have that element of more choice and that more autonomy and maybe a bit more adventurous, there is, it's never too late. And as you said, it was really interesting what you just said about the sleep, that these kids are not, that they might be not waking up and they're not having a good sleep. And we even know when we're feeling sleep deprived, we're more likely to want to eat higher sugar food, higher energy levels, but then that's going to lead to a sugar rush and then a sugar dip. Then that can lead to the irritability, that actually leads to lower productivity, and it doesn't work. It might have those short, sharp bursts, and it's got its time and its place. But if you're looking for sustained energy, not the best approach. But you have to also look at it the other end, don't you? Because why are you not getting the good night's sleep? Are you right after going for the chocolate biscuits just before you go to bed? Change that habit. So it can be maybe even more so some nuts, some cheese, some yogurt, foods higher in tryptophan, that enzyme that actually encourages sleep. is going to then be better for not only our brains and our guts. So we're going to get a more restful sleep. We're going to wake up the next day, and then we'll crave the more sustained style of food. So that's something that we can do for ourselves, and we can also do for our children. I'm one of those mean mums, aren't I, that, like, if they want a dessert, like, they get the Greek yogurt and they'll put some actual cacao through it, and they think it's chocolate yogurt, and I'm like, yeah, kids, that's a chocolate yogurt. I love it, but it's rich in magnesium, and then they sleep really well, and they have the energy for the next day. So
small changes like that, and not a bad thing, Nat. That's brilliant. With your kids, if they think that's the best chocolate they can get. I've just got a couple of comments here, Nat, from our some of our listeners here. So Brett Peterson's just said, I think everyone should do a month of nutrition tracking with MyFitnessPal or something similar. You'll be surprised what you consume. I totally agree with that. Sometimes it's, I guess, Brett, as well, in addition to what we were saying before, it's really just being conscious of what you consume. But if you don't measure it, then you don't really know. So thanks so much, Brett, for your comment there, and Chuck Anderson, who can relate to, I'm assuming, Chuck, it's probably relating to maybe what we were talking about earlier with consuming maybe unconsciously or that kind of thing, perhaps. That's brilliant. Now, you're a busy woman. Is there anything else we want to talk about in regards to burnout and nutrition as well for employees at the moment who might be, I guess, working from home, continuing to work from home, and maybe also battling burnout and maybe caught in that little loop of sugar?
Absolutely. I think it's just trying to change those little snacks, or having that set menu, just until you actually get into I suppose into a bit of a rhythm, whether that is just making a lunch for yourself, or even having trying getting up and having an element of, say, even more so a nutritious breakfast. But as soon as you're full, making your lunch and creating a little mini lunchbox and having an aside. And that also includes an afternoon snack. What that would do is it would try and push you away from the kitchen, away from any form of temptation, and it's at your desk. And I know that we've got those bad habits, and it's not also about just changing all the bad habits at once. If you are still eating, where you're working, because you're still working from home and there's limited space, so be it. But it's more about what you're actually consuming and how that's then being able to help you. It also then helps with what Brett said, is that it's an easy way to track about exactly what you're eating. But, as well as having that diary, it's really good just to put your emotion down on it, because you are eating and then saying, okay, I have changed my diet in the afternoon. From, instead of having the 2 chocolate chip cookies, I've decided to have some dried apricots and some almonds. How did that make you feel? Because you need that evidence to then decide, well, this is going to work, because you have to tell yourself, and you have to also prove that this is a better choice, because look at the impact of that. So we really, that's how we need to change our mindset as well. And we also then need to be, kind on ourselves. Okay, things are, we want to tell ourselves that we're doing enough. These micro steps are really, really, really important. And what we're doing is great, because we're creating a better change for ourselves. For people that actually really say, okay, I used to be a really great, really good at dieting, and I've dropped the ball in the last couple of years, you might take a little bit of a larger step. You might then say, okay, I can feel that my body's overwhelmed, or I need that bit more of a detox. The detox it's a fun word, okay? It's not, again, a sustained place that you can do. We want to be doing those lifestyle changes there. The great way to go and to look at it is probably more so those anti-inflammatory foods, because once we can get our gut calm again, that then creates the signals, the chemical and the physical symptoms, signals to the brain to also calm the brain down. And so that's what's then going to create that state of calmness. Again, people that might be just feeling burnt out, they may not also show it, or they might be able to hold on to it a little bit better. And that's because their diet could actually be better as well. But it just doesn't stop at what we put in our mouth. It's also what we do with ourselves. Movement has got a huge impact. The way we move actually also dictates what we need from a dietary perspective. And again, you might like to record this, because you could be a real slump, right? And you can go, I've got two choices. I can either sit there and eat the chocolate biscuits, or I can go for a walk around the block and then come back and maybe have, I don't know, some yogurt and a huge glass of cold water. Okay,
Yep.
again, rate your energy level. And see the difference there. And the movement actually plays a big part in what we put in our mouth as well. And social connection and accountability. If you want to look at all the diet, that the common denominator or the fantastical diet kind of 8-week things that are out there, big ones, exactly what Brett said. Food diaries. They're big on food diaries, which has got some great evidence behind it, but also accountability. And we also know that with exercise. Grab a friend, even if you are back at work or if you've got a colleague that's close by you, get them to do a challenge where each of you have to bring a nutritious lunch for each other, that day. And that will actually hold you accountable for that person as well as yourself. So it's a really great way just to restart some habits, but start small, see how you feel, and then stack it against each other. And, before you know it, might even take a year to get yourself back on. It doesn't matter. You're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah, great advice, Nat. Thanks so much. And I think the main one for me that I take away from today's session is probably noting a little bit more on the mood aspect, or how I feel, say, if I'm, say, the following morning, if I've eaten it late at night and that kind of thing, just to work out and prove, you have to prove how you're feeling, and also try and work out, try and measure what you're doing in some way. So really great. Love today's session. That was awesome. Have a good day. Thanks so much again.
You too. Okay. Take care, guys.
Talk soon. Bye.